Okay, good evening everyone. Thanks for coming to our first Young Members Group event. We set up this group to, I guess, kind of help create a network amongst young engineers, and I suppose to help bridge the gap from university to actually working in the workplace. So we're quite fluid in what we are planning on doing with our events. But this first one here is basically the Road to Chartership, and it was kindly given by Kieran and Roger here, our director in RPS, and Roger Tegart, our director of Cronin and Sutton. So, as I said, myself, Mairead and Dara, who are in the front row here, we're part of this Young Members Committee, so if you have any questions afterwards or any suggestions for future events, just ask one of us and we'll be delighted to help you. Thanks again.
Okay guys, welcome. We intend this to be quite an informal session really, so if you have any questions when we're talking, by all means raise your hand and we can have a chat, or if you have any questions afterwards, you can open it to the floor or come down and meet us personally, and we'll be happy to give you a steer on things, you know. So essentially what we're going to do is we're just going to give probably some personal thoughts on the chartership process with the IStructE, and just drawing on bits of experience over the years. And obviously it can be quite a daunting process, particularly the IStructE, because it's got a very formidable exam involved in it, let's say. But to take it from step A to step B, you can lessen the fear of that exam, I think, by just working your way through it and getting prepared for it and whatnot. Now, the qualification itself, the IStructE uses this kind of logo, the international passport, to practice, and that actually is what it is, because you find when you travel Ireland, UK, Europe, and CNG of IStructE is on your business card, people do recognise it as a standard bearing for a high quality structural engineer, hopefully, let's say, And IStructE has members across 105 countries, and in certain countries like Ireland, UK and whatnot, and also including certain parts of Canada, the qualification itself is seen as the professional engineering standard. So for example, if you're working in British Columbia, Vancouver, let's say, and you're qualified in IStructE, you're straight away equal to a professional engineer status, and there's a mutual agreement there. So I suppose some of the reasons why the IStructE or the CNG IStructE is so popular is because it's a very rigorous standard. There's two broad parts to it. There's your initial professional development, which I'd say a lot of the young faces in the room will be at that kind of stage now, where you're kind of building your experience maybe over 4 to 5 years, and you're satisfying core objectives set up by the institute, and Roger will go into those in more detail in the second half of the lecture. And then there's the formal examination. The formal examination, as you may know, is a 7-hour exam. Generally, a variety of questions, and you draw on one question depending on your experience. So the purpose of tonight's lecture really is just to clearly explain the process and kind of demystify it, because it can be a bit daunting when you download the various manuals from the IStructE website. It looks like quite a complicated procedure to go from graduate engineer to chartered engineer. So we like to try and demystify that, and also at the end of the evening, you'll get some contacts just from members of the existing committee who will be able to guide you along the process. If you want to drop an email or give us a phone in the months ahead, by all means, please do so. It can be a daunting process. People get a bit hung up on the fact that the exam has got this low pass rate, but it's worth noting in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland branch, generally speaking, about 60% of applicants who attempt the exam pass the exam, and that would be one of the higher percentages from across the world. To pass the exam, you need experience and you need preparation. And I personally feel that one of the reasons that let's say the failure rate is kind of high across the world is that people maybe rush into it, with the minimum 4 to 5 years experience, when perhaps it needs a bit more experience than that, and also perhaps haven't prepared well enough for it. The best intention in the world, when you apply for the exam and you're going to set aside how many months to get ready for it, your working life is going to intervene and your personal life is going to intervene, and it can be quite difficult. So maybe not for want of intent, but just things intervening to sway your preparations. So on the experience side of things, the IStructE would recommend that you spend 4 to 5 years post-graduation gaining the relevant experience, and that's the initial professional development phase. And then once you present your portfolio of work to the local association members, do a 1 hour long interview, you'll either pass that stage, hopefully pass that stage, and go on then to be eligible to take the exam. And the exam, as you know, is a 7-hour design exam, It's often compared to, say, squeezing 1 week's work into 7 hours. And you do need to have a fair body of experience behind you for that, and the experience needs to be quite relevant. So you probably need to be doing a lot of number crunching in your IPD years, such that you can develop two very distinct solutions to a structural problem. And the word distinct there is quite important, because the solutions do have to be kind of different structural systems, and you have to draw on a vast range of skills, not just communication, letter writing, whatnot, but also be expected that you have a decent knowledge of geotechnical engineering and geotechnical design as well. And all these things take a fair bit of time to gain experience. And I often draw, even just from my own personal experience, I did the bridge question, and when you're preparing for the exam, you're kind of looking at all the various questions that come up, and it never kind of dawned on me that an opening bridge would pop up. But in the year that I did the exam, this opening bridge popped up, and it just so happened that, again, just illustrating the experience part of it, I'd say for the first time in about 20 years we had an opening bridge in the office the previous 6 months, and again, it was that level of experience that you need to have behind you that gets you through the tough days when you get maybe a left field kind of question that can appear in the exam, right? And then the preparation part of it, the lack of preparation, it's not from want of intent, but it, generally speaking, is because we all know what it's like to work as graduate engineers, civil engineers, structural engineers. Generally, if you're in practice, it's quite demanding. There can be late nights working, so it can be hard to squeeze in the time to get ready for the exam. And also, you've got to have pretty understanding boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, that type of thing as well, just to allow you the space to get ready for this particular exam, right? Now the preparation, kind of skipping forward a bit, just when you get to go ahead to do the exam, you are probably talking about blocking off the 6 months leading up to that exam and spending a lot of time just getting ready for it. And what a lot of people do, and this is the way I approach it as well, is that you spend a bit of time getting your Lever Arch folder ready, because it is an open book exam. The temptation is there to bring a lot of gear into the exam with you, and that can be kind of maybe counterproductive in some respects. So you'd like to have a kind of a Lever Arch folder just with simple design solutions or quick aid memoirs, that type of thing. And once you gather that over time, it's really a question then of just tackling questions. You might take a random question and give yourself a few weeks to do it over time. And when you've developed your solutions, talk to your colleagues in the office, or give anybody in the committee a ring here, and they'll be happy to give you a bit of a hand with it. And over time, as you get closer to the exam, it's starting to do the papers maybe with a 10-hour time limit, and then down to a 7-hour time limit. So you're just constantly gearing up for the exam, almost like a sporting event that you're gearing up for it. And because 7 hours is quite a demanding mental effort to get through, so you do need to do a bit of training. And generally speaking, you do require that kind of 6 months leading up to the exam to hand over maybe every second weekend or thereabouts, and every weekend leading up to it perhaps. The routes to membership. This is obviously from the IStructE details themselves, but presumably you've all done this. It's complete educational base, and in Ireland we are basically eligible straight away once we've done our 4-year degrees, or BEng honours degree. That's the educational base completed, and there's a note there even that from IStructE that a degree from an EU member state equivalent to BEng honours gives you the initial step into the process, and then you're into initial professional development. And Roger will lay out in more detail what's required here, but 12, 13 core objectives that from the moment you start working, really you want to be keeping a diary and focusing on those core objectives. And then maybe when 3 to 4 to 5 years pass, you're looking at gathering together a portfolio of projects that you've worked on, and then submitting that to the IStructE with your core objectives and your demonstration how they've been achieved, and then basically attending an interview, a bit like very similar to the IEI chartership interview, with 2 or 3 say chartered engineers who just run through the portfolio with you and give you kind of a gentle quizzing on it, and then assuming you pass that, then you're eligible then to enter the exam generally the following year or or two, whatever suits yourself. Now in Ireland, a lot of people would take it this way, because the IStructE has a mutual recognition agreement with Engineers Ireland. What people in Ireland would typically do is just, or in the space of 4 or 5 years after graduating, they would undertake the Chartered Engineers Ireland status. And once you achieve that, first of all, it allows you to call yourself Chartered Engineer straight away, but also gives you a buy-in straight into applying for the exam. So you can kind of bypass the formal kind of core objectives of the IStructE, which are very similar obviously to the EII in any case. In terms of IPD, if you don't want to follow that route and you want to go straight through the IStructE process, the initial professional development, the IStructE kind of talks about 3 types of IPD. You could have individually managed IPD, and this is where you basically you're in an office, you're keeping a diary, you're doing quarterly reports yourself, and you're filing those away, and all the time you're kind of achieving the core objectives which have been laid out. If you're lucky enough to be in an office which has an accredited training scheme with the ICE or other institutions, you can follow that, and once you've been signed off on that scheme, you can go straight to the into the PRI status as well. But the most common one that we tend to use is this one here, the retrospectively collated route. And that is that when you've got your 3 to 4 to 5 years experience, that you gather together your portfolio of experience using the guidelines which are on the IStructE website, and then you submit it to the local committee through the IStructE headquarters, who review it and undertake an interview with you, and that's probably the most standard way that people would tackle it in Ireland, let's say, And then the interview itself, there are application forms that you use from the IStructE website. Again, if you find any of those confusing, the local committee will be very happy to help you fill them in and give you, if you need witnesses from fellows and that type of thing, no particular issue there. But you're writing a report that demonstrates that you've achieved the 12-13 objectives that the IStructE requires you to fulfill. And then the interview schedule, generally speaking, you're applying for that around about the 1st of September each year, with a view that the PRI interview will be held November, December time, in whatever city, Dublin, Belfast, London, whatever city. And if you pass that, then you can go forward and do the exam the following year, although a lot of people will wait another year and do it the following year after that. And that's generally just a quick overview of the process. I might hand over to Roger now, as he will take you through the core objectives.
Hopefully all you guys are student members. It's free, so you should be student members of the institution. It's the first step on the road to chartership, and you should avail of it. It's obviously great value for money in that it is actually free. Chartership is in some ways is maybe the high point of your career. It's certainly a gold standard, and all structural engineers should aim to be chartered. It sets a bar effectively, and lets other people know that you've reached a certain level of competency and expertise, and it's extremely important you focus on it, and it's a goal, a career goal. It should be your most important career goal in your first 5 years. This is what the institution explains how or what chartered members should be able to do. I suppose it's a definition of what a chartered member is. I would add to that effectively you become an expert problem solver. You become very good at communication management, and you've got to be ambitious as well. You find that becoming a chartered member, a chartered engineer, doesn't simply happen. It's something you've got to work towards, and you've got to think about how you're going to get there. It is effectively, it's your career, and you've got to plan it out. Some of you may work for consultancies that have mentorship programs, maybe even accredited training. Notwithstanding that, you spend a large part of your day working on yourself, working on your own, and you need to look back on what you're doing on a weekly or monthly basis to see that you're progressing in the right direction, and that in 3 or 4 years you're going to have the required experience. As Kieran has already outlined, there are there are 3 areas or 3 stages to becoming a chartered engineer. Obviously your academic qualification in the first instance, and then your professional development, followed by your interview and your examination. And you can't really take, particularly the professional development and the examination, you can't really take them as complete separate entities. The exam is a 7-hour exam, but having said that, if you have if you've been orientated towards achieving that over your 3 or 4 years, the exam really should be a doddle to you. And I say that because you develop and gain the experience you need if you go out there and if you want to pass the exam, and you're determined to do that, and you keep an eye on what you're doing day to day and the type of work you're being assigned in your consultancies and the type of projects you get to do, and you're a little bit demanding about the type of work you do over that period of 3 or 4 years, the exam will be easy at the end. You'll have so much experience. I think Kieran said that the success rate for Irish engineers sitting the exam is about 60%, and the reason for that is because you get a much broader range of experience working with an Irish consultancy than you might necessarily do working for a big consultancy in the US or in the UK, and you get to do a far more varied workload and a more varied level of experience, which should make the exam a foregone conclusion. Everybody has bad exams and bad days, but believe me, it's about being determined to get there, and it's, you know, whether you pass or fail the exam is not the 7 hours you do in May or January or whatever the exams are going to be set. It really is how much work you do in the 4 years up to that. So the institution, I suppose the exam, the interview and the professional development are designed to sort of to assess your suitability and your performance in 3 areas: personal engineering, which is technical, and then management and commercial. And to be, I suppose, to uphold the standards of the institution, you've got to be competent in all those 3 areas. And I'll go through those in a little bit of detail. There are minimum standards that they want you to achieve in each of these, and this is, I suppose, this is relevant both to your professional development and to the exam. But I suppose it applies to your career thereafter as well. I mean, to be honest, the exam is really only it makes you a chartered engineer and it gives you that official title. But your career development goes on from there, and I suppose the values you learn in achieving chartership you'll take through with you for the rest of your career. These are the basic standards, which are effectively whether or not you have an appreciation for a subject, a certain amount of knowledge about it, experience in having done it, or you demonstrate an ability. And you'll see these are minimum standards applied to each particular core objective. So these are the core objectives, and these are the type of things you should be keeping an eye on. I mean, whether or not, whatever route you take to chartership, whether you're going to mentor yourself or whether there's an in-house course. I mean, obviously, you know, we'd like to see people do the institution's preparation course here in advance of the exam. But leading up to that, you should be looking at what you're doing day to day, month to month, and how you're trying to achieve these objectives. So the objectives, I mean, these are the personal ones that relate to, I suppose, yourself personally as an engineer. You've got to know something about the institution you want to become a chartered member of. I mean, that's self-evident. You've got to have some involvement. You've got to be able to go to meetings. You've got to, you've got to keep up with your CPD. And you've got to know something about it, and you may well be asked about that at your interview. I mean, have you gone to lectures? Have you had any involvement? Are you involved with the student end of the institution? You have to have some involvement, so it's as well to get involved in it early enough. This is, I mean, along with technical ability, I think communication is probably it's one of your core values as an engineer, and it's something. I mean, we're talking about communication on drawings and calculations, verbally, via IT. You know, you can have the greatest ideas and you can be the most technically gifted problem solver, but if you can't communicate and communicate effectively, and not just to your fellow engineers, to non-professionals, design team members, clients, and you need to think about that day to day, and it's something that you develop with experience. And young engineers often find it quite difficult to I mean, they're having enough trouble, I suppose, getting their head around what they're trying to do, and being able to communicate it onto a third party can be quite difficult. Communicate it effectively, that becomes obviously far more important when you work with a consultant in a consultancy, because how you communicate with particularly clients or architects can have a big impact on the job. So you should, there are certain key things here with respect to how you demonstrate as part of your portfolio of experience that you're going to build up over 3 years, about how you can demonstrate an ability to communicate. And these slides are all downloadable from the institution's website anyway, so I won't labour on them. But obviously, you've got to show an interest in writing letters. You've got to take an interest in letters that are written in the office, and how they're written and how they're phrased, and how ideas are communicated. As graduate engineers, the communicating you probably do most frequently is with your own calculations and drawings, and communicating with draftsmen in the office. And you should dwell on that and think about if somebody picks something up you've done, is it legible? Does it express the intent of what you are trying to do? Because if you don't practice that over the 3 or 4 years before you sit the exam, your exam, often people fail these exams because they simply can't communicate. They can't communicate effectively what it is that they're trying to do, the schemes they're trying to develop, the calculations they're trying to do. You obviously got to be able to conceptualize your engineering designs, and that is effectively taking it. In some cases, it'll be taking a client's brief, it could be an architect's brief, it could be the brief from your director in your office who's asking you to do a certain thing, and it may be so much that you need clarification. You shouldn't be afraid to ask for clarification, because if you start off obviously and you're not clear what it is you're supposed to be doing, you're never going to deliver the product at the very end. You've got to be able to demonstrate as part of your professional development that instances where you've done this, and I'll talk about this later on about your there's a whole load of forms and stuff that the institution provides that you should use on a quarterly or monthly basis to track your progress. Obviously, this is the one that I suppose graduate engineers and students are most familiar with, which is the ability to analyse structural problems, analyse and determine stresses and strains and deflections and everything else. That's probably the easiest thing, and it's the one thing you do. You spend 4 years in college leading up to that point, and it should be second nature. You always learn, and you always have to keep refreshing yourself on how you do things and why you do certain things in the way you determine and analyse structures. I suppose one of the key things here is the ability to think independently and to have confidence in your design, and because you need to build on that confidence during those 3 or 4 years before you sit the exam. And the way to do that is to be extremely thorough in what you do, and to practice and practice and practice over and above necessarily what your daily workload is. I mean, if you are weak in particular areas, I mean, nobody comes out of college even with a first class honours could think that they know everything there is to know about engineering. So you should take it on yourself to progress your learning in your first couple of years at a consultancy. If you feel you have weaknesses, you talk to people, you do some background reading and research, so that you're fully competent in these, that you can say you've looked at these topics and you know something about them, or at least you know where to go and find something else about them if a particular problem comes up. Obviously, in working in Irish consultancies, most people are going to get an introduction to steel, concrete, masonry and timber. If you're working in maybe consultancies abroad, you might get stuck doing one thing or another. But you need to have at least a knowledge of the properties of the four main materials. And if you don't, even if you don't plan to answer an exam question on one of them, you should certainly know something about them. I mean, this isn't simply about sitting the exam at the end. This is about developing as an engineer, because that's what chartership is. It isn't just simply passing an exam after 4 years. Obviously, the environmental aspect of what we do is extremely important, and you need to know something about what it is what you do day to day and how it affects not just the environment of a specific site, but obviously on a broader context as well. And it should be part of your design philosophy as you develop designs for particular projects, particular sites. I mean, we're not here to tear the earth asunder in trying to put up a block of flats, and sometimes just a little bit of careful thought can make a bit of difference. You need to demonstrate anyway as part of your development that that you have put some thought into this on various projects. I mean, there are some fairly simple ones here. I mean, we're obviously in Dublin can be familiar enough with contaminated land, sustainability, methane and radon gas. You should obviously, if you don't know something about these, I mean, I would say my advice would be that you download these from the website and you stick them on your desk in front of you, and every 3 or 4 weeks you go back and you think, well, have I dealt with any of these? I mean, have I come, are there any projects in the office? Can I get up and walk across to a senior engineer or somebody else and ask them, what's his experience in these? Are we doing any projects in the office? As I said, it is your career, and it really is up to you to go out there and to make sure that you're in a position to pass the exam. You just can't rock up after 3 years and hope to pass it unless you've actually gone out of your way to make sure that you've obtained the relevant experience. Obviously, you've got to have some experience of construction techniques. I mean, most people are going to site meetings and will get some time on site, even if it is fortnightly. You just open your eyes on site. Now, I know there's not an awful lot of sites in Dublin, so that's a lot more difficult than it used to be. But again, it may be a case that you have to ask someone, can you go out to site with them? If there's something interesting going on, you haven't seen it before, you put your hand up and say, look, I wouldn't mind going out and seeing this. There's a pour going on, or there's a deep basement here, or there's temporary works or propping. I'd like to see that. Can I go out? It doesn't necessarily need to be, something you're working directly on in the office. Well, these are just some of the construction topics. I mean, as I said, a lot of this is about it's about deciding what you want to do in those 3 years and making the most of it, and going out there, looking at the work your office is doing, and trying to get familiar with all these topics. As a chartered engineer, obviously you can't ignore both the management and commercial side of what we do, particularly in the current environment. Fees are extremely tight, and we need to be extremely efficient in what we do. And you've got to demonstrate that you've some experience in this, or at least an understanding. And we talk about leadership skills. I mean, leadership skills can apply to just simply how you deal with draftsmen on a day-to-day basis, and they may not be the only team or the only people you're actually in charge of or directing, but you can think about how you communicate to those people who are doing drawing work for you, and the management skills. I mean, often for graduate engineers, it's self-management, how you manage yourself, how you manage your time, how you manage your workload, how effectively do you do that. Do you look at how you do it? I mean, do you quantify what you're doing day to day and think about it, other than just trying to get through your 9 to 5 or 9 to 6? There are ways, obviously, of demonstrating your you've attained a certain level of competency, going back to the minimum standards, and these are simple enough. I mean, attendance of products at a project meeting ticks a box there that you've gone and you've looked at how a project is managed. You've maybe spoken with the architect. It goes back to communication as much as anything else, and being involved in the process. You've got to have an understanding of contractual and legal matters associated with the business you're involved in. I mean, at graduate level that might be on the periphery, but there's nothing stopping you at lunchtime, reading up a little bit about PI insurance and how it affects what we do. As I said, the broader your experience, the broader you make your experience over those 3 or 4 years, the easier the exam will be. Health and safety, another one of the core objectives. It often falls to the junior engineer to write the design risk assessment for a project anyway, which is good practice. And if it isn't handed to you, you should put your hand up and say, well, I wouldn't mind writing it. At least I'll find out a little bit about the issues that affect health and safety on site and how my design influences those. You've got to be able to show that you have some knowledge of that. This goes back to this is another important one. I mean, as a junior engineer, you might not necessarily be involved in this day to day, but you should have an interest, and you should try and find out about how jobs are tendered, how the level of fees are set, and how much the project is, how much it costs to do in the office. Because at some point, with probably very little introduction, you'll be handed something to price, and it's pointless at that saying, well, look, I know nothing about it, I haven't paid attention, I haven't asked a question in the past 4 years. We need to be even more efficient than we've ever been as engineers, and how the cost of a project, how much it costs to do that in the office is part of that, and how projects are how they're run and how much they cost the client. I mean, clients are they're not really interested in the size of the columns you're using or the depth of the beams, other than the cost of those elements. Architects obviously have different interests, but you need to have an awareness of the cost of the schemes you're putting together, which is more expensive. And you need to do that. You need to read the latest journals. You need to see which materials are more expensive at the moment, and what's common in the industry, and what projects have been built out of. Are hotels being built in steel, or they've been built in concrete? Why is that? And ask questions and develop an understanding. I mean, most of you guys are probably working 40 hours, 45 hours a week. You need to take a certain amount of that time as your own professional development, and stand back from number crunching and maybe marking up drawings and stuff, and think about, well, what am I getting out of today? Have I learned something? What have I learned this week? Is it bringing me closer to my chartership? And if it isn't, you should be asking why. Is it a failure on the firm you're working with, or is it a failure that you're not interested enough? Contact documentation. Well, that's you've got to know about forms of contract, and how jobs are procured, and the type of contracts we sign with different types of clients. Again, it's background reading, particularly at junior engineer level. And there's a list of different types of contracts. I mean, you're not going to know about these in detail, and nor do you need to, other than you need to be able to know if someone says something at a meeting, at least you'll have an understanding. You won't have a blank look if somebody asks you a question. This is background reading that you should be doing on all the topics that you don't know anything about. You should know at least the quality system in your own office. I know they tend to be a bit of a millstone around people's neck at times, and a lot of offices have them and don't necessarily employ them day to day. But you should at least know, what system your office is using, and are you using it on a daily basis, and at least extract the bits of it that might necessarily be useful to you, to help you with keep control of your work, the quality of your work. on a day-to-day basis. Oh, and that's the end of that. I really didn't mean to say that if anybody has any questions, because we'll ask them if anybody has any questions and nobody will have any. So if somebody wants to just jump right in. Kieran is there somewhere. If anybody has any questions, it's easy. I mean, the exam is easy. It should be nothing that anybody has any concern about at all. It'll be a relief after your 3 or 4 years as young engineers.
Previously there was courses ran, wasn't there, leading up to exams and preparation.
And the institution will be running those again this year, and they are excellent. They're 6 weeks, 6 weeks, I think, are they?
Sorry, there are 2 courses. We're running a graduate course starting in January, which I think is about 14 weeks long. Maybe all just shocked. It's about 2 hours an evening or 3 hours an evening, and we're going to cover maybe concrete one day, multi-story buildings another day, and so on. It's actually, I went to it many years ago, and it's just fantastic. It's a bit of a refresher from everything you've learned in college. Yeah. I'm organising that, so I'll be in touch.
Sign up, yeah. And there is a preparation course then as well in advance. The changes to the exams, is that from this year, January of this year? Yeah. So you have 2 exams and the preparation course is in December, I think we're talking.
We'll be going for. Yeah.
So anybody doing it this year should definitely be signing up for it. It's extremely useful, along with some exam preparation techniques. I mean that's the technical side of the exam, practice and dry runs and stuff like that. I mean, you're all used to sitting exams, so that should be no that should be no mystery to you.
Oh, great question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry, thanks everybody. I don't know.
Well, the date of November 20th is still on the website. That must be changed,
Okay.
We'll find out. I mean, maybe do a circular email to all the IBAs attended on that. Because we need a bit of flux at the moment. So.
Good point.
What are the changes to the exam? Exactly.
Well, I might just start briefly. The number of questions has been reduced. So, for example, there was an offshore question, and it was found that there wasn't a great take up of that question. That maybe 1 or 2 candidates a year took that question. I think it was one of the structural disasters, bigger, smaller niche topics. So it's reduced the number of questions, and rather than having the exam once a year, which is run about last Friday in the Easter holidays at that time, the exam is not going to be held in January and July, starting in 2015. There are broadly the changes. The exam format will stay the same. That is 50% of the marks going for conceptual development, 6 solutions, that type of thing, and 50% of the marks going in for the design development. That type of thing. Also, it's really it's reduction number of questions and a double chance each year or two times each year to undertake the exam.
There's a cap on how many times you can take the exam, isn't it?
There is, I think it's 4. Is that I could be wrong? That is for punishment if you were to take 4 times. Was it 8?
Nobody should need more than 1 attempt. So, I mean, if you're prepared for it, if you've downloaded that and you have the core objectives and you spend your time over 3 years, you have 3 years to prepare for it. It's enough time to prepare for any 7-hour exam. I mean, you're immersed in it day in, day out if you're working in a consultancy. So it should be very straightforward. If you go out and you get the required experience, and if you do those things that the institution considers as core objectives. And it's up to you to get that experience.
I made a point that it's really an experience and preparation. Once you hit those 2 things, the big prize is not having to repeat the exam. And that's the goal I had my head when I was trying to do the exam. The thought of coming back 12 months' time to repeat it would have been a real curse,
And I would probably concur with what Roger says. The year coming up to it is all about practice, and just don't leave it too late, because if I were to do it now I wouldn't get it, because I'm not sitting designing beams and scheming out every day. And I was really in that zone when I did it, and that's probably the only reason I got it, because you're just used to doing that every day. So pick your timing carefully. Don't wait until you're getting into management and you're not necessarily doing the maths anymore. Just be aware that you really need to get it out at about that stage.
You got sound advice.
I haven't seen any of the questions or anything, but put an awful lot of emphasis on the kind of managerial side of things, project overview as a whole. Does that factor into the exam at all, or is it just literally schemes?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there are sections in the questions where you have to write letters to clients to explain, changes in the scheme and stuff. I mean, they tend to be fairly technical. I mean, you're not asked to put in a fee bid for a change or anything like that. I mean, it's the management side of it is, you want to come to. So I'm talking in a broader sense, not just about the exam. The exam is just one point on your road to being a chartered engineer. It's a test at the end, as much for yourself as it is. It's for the industry as a whole to say, look, this guy, we're going to call him chartered. He has reached a certain level of expertise. Now the exam is very technical, and in that respect, it should be fairly straightforward. I mean, 3 years it would be difficult enough to sit at, a year out of college because you simply wouldn't have the required experience. But after 3 years, you should do.
I really admire your confidence. I find it much harder.
No, well, you have to be confident about it. It's a goal. It's an incredibly important career goal, and you set your sights on it, and you go and do it. It's that simple. There's no reason why anybody should fail it other than they have an extremely bad day, or you don't read the question or you get flustered. If you've done enough preparation, and I mean, to reiterate what Kieran said, I mean, preparation, you've got to do dry runs. I mean, obviously, I will say what the only difficult thing about the exam is not the content, it's the fact that it's only 7 hours long, and you've quite a lot to do in 7 hours. And the way to make sure that you get what needs to be done in 7 hours is you've got to practice it, and you've got to do full dry runs, 7-hour dry runs, and you've got to do 2 of them, 3 of them with practice questions that you haven't seen before, and that's the way to do it. And you won't get through the first one, you won't even get halfway through it. And you'll develop a style, and you do 3 or 4 of them. But if you don't do dry runs, you won't pass it. That's for sure. But that's just exam preparation. I mean, that's not, if you haven't got the required, if you haven't fulfilled some of these core objectives, you won't get it either. Because the questions won't mean anything to you.
Maybe just to pick up on what Roger said as well. Certainly, in terms of when I was an employer. Roger said, ask somebody, can you go out and site to see that? Ask somebody, can you have a look at that? Actually, employers love that. They don't see that as being a burden if you keep asking to do stuff. They love to see that sort of energy and enthusiasm. So I would definitely recommend if there's something you want to get into, just ask. I think in general, people are quite happy to. But, I'm sure some of you guys are thinking, they can't afford for me to be away there and I'm supposed to be working on this. I would take the opposite view. If I have somebody who's really keen, I'm really, happy to invest that time in them. So. Ask.
Just as an education requirement, is the level 8 degree sufficient?
It is now. The answer is yes at the moment. What you do is you need to check with the IStructE each year to make sure that your degree program is on their list of accredited courses. But generally speaking, all the Irish degrees all the 4-year honours degrees are accredited to see as the educational base, but it's worth keeping an eye on it.
You had a master's.
Well, master's not the.
But you had to go through exactly the same routine if you had a master's.
Well, it depends what your base degree is. Are you saying if you've a level 8 honours degree in engineering, or is it a covenant degree, and then your master's in engineering? Basically, if you've any doubts at all, the education secretary over in IStructE will ask that question quickly for you. But is that the case? It's a covenant degree plus an add-on master's in engineering. You should be okay, but you'd have to check out individually in that case, probably.
Is the exam changing in that you have to use Unicode?
No, the exam is almost independent of design codes.
Okay.
And you actually find that in the UK, people still use the OPS 449, which is the old direct stress design for steel. You can use whatever design code you want in the exam. Hence, you see it's an international exam. You head anywhere in the world. It is held anywhere in the world in most places in the world.
Your supporters,
Yeah, that's if you need a fellow, just contact any of the members of the committee and you can organise that. They're still on the ground, but there's a few in a row in our liberation.
Maybe just pick up on that. For all the students who I invited here, one of the reasons that I invited you is because I genuinely asked when I was an employer interviewing for graduates, do you know how to become chartered? So you now know. Okay. But if you're not a student member, it's free. There we go, free. And I've even brought the application form. And anyone who's in DIT, once you complete it, just drop it into my post box and I'll sign off the employer type part. I've also got application forms for graduates. If you're a graduate member, I have application forms here for that. Or if you want to be a graduate member.
If you're already a student member,
You still have to apply to become a graduate member once you graduate. Yeah. So take one out.
So if you get any more questions, thanks again for coming and thanks to our speakers again as well. We're planning on having our next event next month. So it's a site visit to Grange Gorman because, as you all know, Dublin hasn't been very active in terms of construction work over the last few years. So a lot of us probably don't have site experience. So I suppose if you're in the position that you're just starting out in your work, you haven't been brought to site, you don't really know what to look for, what to expect, we're organising an event, or we hope to, over the next year, I guess. So our first one is next month. And we might have another event before Christmas then. Then after Christmas then we've no direct plans as such yet. We hope to have some project talks, ideally given by young engineers.